join the special thanks of my partner, to our president, Professor Hart, to our dean, Professor Barmore, to my co-organizer of the conference, Advocate Cannir, and last but not least, Advocate Galanty, that without her enormous assistance to successfully conducting the entire conference, nothing, almost nothing, has been happening here today. But now I want to share with you the conclusion of our forthcoming article, here sitting my co-author. And let's start. The title of the presentation you heard already. Let's start 2 years ago with our mutual previous article, and we wrote, some experts have defined the year 2019 as, and I quote, a critical time for abortion rights, since during the first half of the year alone, 19 American states enacted almost 60 abortion restrictions, including 26 abortion bans, and state legislators introduced many more. You can see the title of the previous article was Towards a New Archimedean Point of Maternal versus Fetal Rights, ? It was actually a rhetoric question because, as we all know, the question is bright and clear. Now let's start with the first part of our article, introduction, the new era of post-Roe versus Wade. As my co-organizer said before, on June this year, a dramatic and far-reaching moral and legal tectonic earthquake shocked the United States with the announcement of the US Supreme Court decision in Dobbs versus Jackson, overturning the landmark abortion case, Roe versus Wade, as we probably will hear here today over and over again. Considering the ongoing tsunami of commentary since the Dobbs decision and the resulting return of regulatory authority over abortion to the 50 states, it is surprising that little has been written on the obligations, duties, and responsibility aspects of this dramatic change. Let's hope that both the presentation and the article will fill in this lacuna. Let's continue to the modern liberal Western human rights discourse. Recognition of the human rights discourse is central to the vast majority of abortions the vast majority of the modern liberal Western world, to exclude the United States for some justification. I don't have time to go into this point. There is a consensus among abortion's proponents that the right to abort is one of the most basic human rights every pregnant woman has, since it is the ultimate, intimate, personal decision carrying far-reaching ramifications that a given woman can make in her entire life. And let's continue to the recent surge in commitment, responsibility, and obligation discourse. Together with the prevailing human rights discourse in the modern era, there has also been a strengthening of the obligations, commitments, and responsibilities discourse over recent decades. There is no doubt that slowly but surely the exclusivity and comprehensively usage of the human rights terminology have been narrowed in the past half-century, giving way to the expansion of the use of the obligations, commitments, and responsibility discourse. Now let's continue to the Jewish ethics strong obligations discourse. As I wrote in my first book, you can see here the title, one of the most basic and central differences between halacha and modern liberal civil law is conceptualizing the relationship between a person and is or earn sovereign in totally different rhetoric, whereas Jewish law structured the relationship between an individual and his or her creator in terms of duties. Civil law conceptualizes the relationship between individuals or between individuals and their sovereign in terms of right. In every outset of my Jewish law course, as well as many other courses, I exploring with my student, my beloved students sitting here, this very interesting point. Let's continue to Robert Cover, very well-known law professor from Yale University, maybe Professor Sinai knows him personally. He wrote that the principal word in Jewish law, which occupies a place equivalent in evocative force to the American legal system's rights, is the word mitzvah, which literally means commandment, but has a general meaning closer to incumbent obligation. This is the Jewish point. Let's speak a little bit about the Israeli Jewish point of view. As you can see here, the capacity and guardianship law, article number 15, dealing with parental rights, it is not only defined as right but also an obligation. Obligation and the right to care for the needs of a minor, including his education, studies, training for work, occupation and employment, and so on and so forth. It is only speaking about the right, but actually the obligation is the two flip side, the two sides of the same coin in a Jewish and Israeli state. And now let's go to the conclusion, a partial revelation of Roe versus Wade, question mark. One of the most very well-known philosopher, a Jewish of course, Judith Thompson, in her article, A Defense of Abortion, it is very well known, but what is much less known in her article, it's the following statement. Suppose a woman voluntary indulgence in intercourse, knowing of the chance it will issue in pregnancy, and then she does become pregnant. Is she not in part responsible for the presence, in fact, the very existence of the unborn person inside her? And she continues, that the fetus is dependent on the mother in order to establish that she has a special kind of responsibility for it, a responsibility that gives it rights against her which are not possessed by any independent person, such as an ailing violinist who is a stranger to her. It's a very well-known illustration of her article. Now let's add to the discussion a British law professor, Gillian Douglas, from King's College of London. Willingly engaging in behavior that runs the risk of creating a child or failing to terminate a pregnancy seems a valid moral basis for imposing the prior obligation to take care of that child. It is not our words, but other scholars all over the globe. Now, let's see what we have to see in this direction. In our opinion, we should distinguish between whether consensual or non-consensual sex, including possible misuse of contraceptive method, contraceptive failure, such as condom failure, has caused the pregnancy. In the first scenario, the new discourses about obligation, commitment, and responsibility should be superior, whereas in the later, the women's rights discourse should govern. And as a support of the last statement, the last part of the previous statement, I wrote in my second book, here the title, in my opinion, In any case of imposition of parental status, especially its legal obligations, we should consider the essence of having a conjugal relationship as actually being an implied agreement to accept the obvious resulting outcomes of this action. Therefore, the obligation to provide for the child's support and all his other needs can be deduced from the implied intention to accept the legal parenthood that may derive from having sexual relations with the conceived child's mother. And we continue. However, Jewish law, which is characterized by its obligations discourse, imposes a much broader duty to rescue obligation. It is very well rooted in the Jewish legacy, but totally missing in all other jurisdictions, civil and religious, to include Christianity. Any individual Jew is obligated to rescue another Jew and or even a Gentile insofar as it does not profoundly jeopardize himself. This is even truer in the case of pregnancy and procreation, due to a paramount Jewish commandment to be fruitful and multiply, and we concluded that it bears emphasizing that this obligation is fulfilled only when the woman has intentionally chosen to procreate following consensual sex, and definitely not where she was coerced to becoming pregnant, or where non-consensual sex, as I mentioned before, including possible misuse of contraceptive method, contraceptive failure, such as condom failure, has yielded the pregnancy. Thank you so much for your attention.